Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the LEA Special Education Point of Contact Start of School webinar. This is the part 2 to our webinar series for the 2023-24 school year. Part 1 being our webinar last week for new LEA Special Ed Points of Contact. My name is LaShonda Wilson, and I am an Education Program Specialist here at OSSE. I'm joined this morning by my OSSE colleagues across multiple divisions as we present content pertinent to starter school activities in the areas of policy, monitoring, and professional development for LEA SPED POCs. We'll wait just a couple moments for folks to get logged in, and then we'll get started. All right. Again, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the LEA Special Education Point of Contact Start of School webinar. This is the part 2 to our webinar series, part 1 being our webinar last week for new LEA Special Education Points of Contact. My name is LaShonda Wilson, and I am an Education Program Specialist here at OSSE. I'm joined today by our OSSE colleagues across multiple divisions as we present content pertinent to starter school activities in the areas of policy, monitoring, and professional development for all LEA Special Education Points of Contact. Okay, in terms of our agenda for today, we'll begin with policy reminders and updates in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, monitoring and updates. We'll segue into transportation reminders and updates and assessments reminders and updates, followed by non-public reminders and updates and teaching and learning reminders and updates. We'll conclude with announcements and reminders, and then we'll close out with a Q&A session. All right, I'll turn it over now to my colleague, Christy Weaver-Harris, to discuss policy reminders and updates. Christy?
Good morning, everybody. This is Christy Weaver-Harris, the Policy Manager in OSSE's Division of K-12 Systems and Supports. Next slide, please. All right, as a reminder, I'm going to give you a quick once over of the basic authorities that we work with around special education and highlight some priority points and additional resources for you. So governing the education of students with disabilities are federal law and regulations, which is IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And at the local level, we have DC laws that are found in DC code. Those are set by the DC Council. And then we have DC regulations that are set by OSSE. Those are specifically drafted and proposed by my team. And generally we refer to that as Chapter 30. And then we have a host of local policies and guidance. In July 2022, we completed an update of the local regulations. And then we also still have policies available on our website, but the most recent authority that you're going to want to reference is Chapter 30. To further support LEAs in implementing both federal and local requirements, my team releases a variety of guidance documents, including most often policy bulletins that describe LEA responsibilities on really specific topics. In the next few weeks, we will be releasing a special education process handbook, which will give you an overview of responsibilities from referral through graduation. So keep an eye out for that. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to touch on the transition to special programs from a policy perspective. To be clear, all federal and DC requirements remain in effect as compared to last year and SEDS and what you were doing in SEDS. There have been no changes in requirements. You are responsible for documenting special education processes in accordance with IDEA and Chapter 30. Now, some of those things will look different in special programs, but it does not change your obligations. Special programs is a documentation system. It's not a requirements or a compliance system, okay? You have discretion within special programs and the documents therein to determine where and how you will document your LEA's obligations. You can also upload documents to the student's file to make sure that you are appropriately documenting your LEA's obligations. We're going to have some growing pains over the next year as we all adjust to the system, and I would appreciate it as we go through that if you would reach out to me directly when you have policy or requirement issues that you see in the system. One area that I've heard a little bit about from you all is how present levels and goals are documented, and a desire to be able to assign multiple goals to one present level. You can document baseline, like there's been a lot of questions about like where to document things and how to document things. You can continue to document things in the way that you were before. For example, you can document baseline data related to a present level within the text box for that present level. I'm hearing somebody unmuted. Okay. So again, this is a documentation system. Oh, I'm sorry, LaShonda, can you go back one slide? Thanks. So again, this is a documentation system. You can determine where to document things. I've also got a few questions about the 504 module. So I do want to clarify that the 504 module in special programs is not mandatory. The LEAs are strongly encouraged to use it. So a student's 504 plan can be centrally documented and it can travel with them if they change LEAs. You can use the 504 template that's provided, or you can upload a separate document into the student's special programs documents. So we designed that 504 template to be fairly generic. We looked at a lot of different LEAs approaches to documenting 504, and they've widely varied. So instead of trying to mandate one form and try and take into consideration everybody's different approaches, we have a pretty generic template in there. Again, you're not required to use it, but we do strongly encourage you to either upload that student's document into special programs so it goes with them, or use that template. You do continue to be required to submit the 504 yes/no through the nightly. So like I said, we're going to have some growing pains over the next year. Please reach out to me directly if you have questions about policy requirements within the system. Don't reach out to me about access for student-specific technical issues. I can't answer those, and I'm just going to redirect you to OST. So please don't waste valuable student time emailing me about systems issues that I'm not going to be able to help you with. Next slide. All right, so as you know, documenting the first provision of specialized instruction is a high priority for the district. It supports the district's progress, performance, and reporting to the court in the DL case, which is specifically related to early childhood special education. For the 2023-24 school year, LEAs continue to be required to document the first provision of specialized instruction for students under the age of 6 who have specialized instruction prescribed on the IEP, but for whom specialized instruction has not been previously documented, including students who are transitioning around the age of 3 from Part C early intervention services or Strong Start, students who are transitioning around the age of 4 from an extended ISP, students younger than age 6, newly determined eligible. I'm sorry about the typo on that side. I just noticed that. So students under the age of 6 who are newly determined eligible for special education, and that includes students transferring from out of state, and also students under the age of 6 who have recently had specialized instruction added to their IEP for the first time. So you are required to provide specialized instruction on the first day of school for the majority of those students. Please ensure that your documentation of specialized instruction is consistent with the first date of stage 5 enrollment for that child. It doesn't have to be documented in special programs on that day, but the service must be provided that day. You don't need to document the first provision of specialized instruction for any other students or on an ongoing basis. And good news is that we've made the process much easier in special programs. And we have published a step-by-step guide that walks you through the process for it. I'll drop a link to the guide in the chat after I'm done presenting. But I'm also going to show you how to do it. So next slide, please. All right, so this is what the document looks like in special programs. As you can see, it's really, really simple. First, you're going to generate the first provision of specialized instruction document in the child's profile. If you don't see that document and you believe that you should, or you get an error that you don't think is relevant for your student when you're trying to generate that document, please submit an OST ticket. That's it's a good example of something that you can't email me about. You can email me about it, but I'm going to tell you to submit an OST ticket. So please submit an OST ticket if you have student-specific issues with it. So this system, once this document generates, the system will automatically tell you the specialized instruction due date. Then it uses logic that was provided by OSSE. Okay, first you're going to confirm whether specialized instruction was provided by the due date by selecting yes or no. If you select yes, you're done. You can click save, done editing, and then set the document to final. If you select no, it was not provided on the date that OSSE identifies, you're going to need to indicate why specialized instruction was not provided timely. We're asking this question to better inform OSSE's own training and technical assistance to better support you in effectively and timely implementing both the requirements of the DL lawsuit and specialized instruction in a timely way. This is not necessarily a monitoring piece. We really want to know what barriers you experience in implementing this requirement in a timely manner. And we know that there are a lot of very real and very practical reasons why LEAs are not providing specialized instruction on the first day of state travel enrollment. So you'll also see that there's an other option here. There will be a text box that generates that you're going to have to write a written description in if you select other. If you said no, that specialized instruction was not provided on that date, we're also asking for the date that specialized instruction was provided. We'd like to be able to do some analysis and research here to see about delays and to be able to calculate that stuff. So as you can see, it's a pretty simple document. You don't have to do those hard copy forms anymore. You don't have to obtain signatures, none of that. It's just this form in special programs. So if you have questions about this document or this process, you can reach out to me. If you have questions about access in special programs or student-specific issues, please submit an OST ticket. If you have any questions about this, I'll be keeping an eye on the questions box for the rest of the webinar. I think that's it for me. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to turn it back to LaShonda.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Christy. I'll turn it over now to Karen Morgan Donaldson to review IDEA monitoring reminders and updates.
Thanks, LaShonda. Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Morgan Donaldson, and I'll be sharing some special education monitoring and compliance updates with you today regarding activities for this school year. This slide provides the annual IDEA monitoring activities for this school year in chronological order. We will be soon providing LEAs a special education calendar with more details on the specific timelines for these activities. So stay tuned. But this fall, we will be monitoring or notifying LEAs who have been flagged for significant discrepancy, which is our APR indicator 4, suspension and expulsion of students with disabilities. We'll also be monitoring and notifying LEAs who were flagged for disproportionate representation, which is APR indicator 9 and 10, over identification of students in a specific race or ethnicity in special education and/or specific disability category. We will also be identifying LEAs who have a significant disproportionality, which is a separate requirement, which means that those if you're identified for having significant disproportionality, that means that your LEA is required to set aside CEIS funds. In the spring, we will monitor for secondary transition requirements and reevaluation timeliness. And of course, this is part of our specific conditions that the district is under from the Department of Education. And next summer, we will monitor for initial evaluation, which is indicator 11, and transition from CW timeliness, which is indicator 12. We will also be monitoring for the compliance in FAPE and LRE as part of our on-site and desktop monitoring activities, and more to come on that in a couple slides. Next slide, please. Okay, on July 13th, OSSE released LEA's first annual Special Education Performance Report, which we call SEPR. All LEAs can access the report in the SEPR application in the QuickBase. If you need access to that, go ahead and reach out to me directly. All LEAs are afforded an appeal window until September 7th. LEA reports will be made public on OSSE's website by September 30th. Quick note, in the notification or the email that went out to LEAs, there was information about office hours. If you would like to set up office hours, if you have not had the opportunity to do so, please reach out to me directly, and I can go ahead and set that up. It is not too late to set up office hours. So any questions related to SEPR, feel free to contact me directly. Next slide. Okay, so really quick, for SEPR, what's next? We get this question a lot. And SEPR is the first step in a long game for improving outcomes for students with disabilities in the district. So once all SEPRs are finalized and made public, OSSE is going to conduct an analysis of all LEA SEPRs. We're going to identify trends, and we are going to plan for appropriate supports in professional development, in the form of technical assistance. So this is a multi-year process. And then once we have that plan in place, we will implement that plan and then monitor for compliance and improvement. And in our next slide, I'll provide a little more information about how we will monitor for compliance and improvement. Next slide. Okay, IDEA on-site and desktop monitoring. For those of you that have been around for a while, we are no longer facilitating risk-based monitoring. We are going to have our own set-aside IDEA on-site and desktop monitoring process. It will be a multi-year process that meaningfully monitors compliance and improvement in specific areas to effectively drive positive outcomes for students with disabilities. So it is not just a punitive process, it is a support and it is an opportunity for OSSE to really dig in with LEAs to monitor improvement and create plans for how that improvement can continue. It will be cyclical. There will be a cohort model, and it will be differentiated based on support needed from LEAs. So this is where SEPR comes into play. Depending on an LEA's SEPR score, will determine what monitoring looks like for this. The first cohort will be notified of selection for monitoring this fall. Okay, next slide. Okay, and speaking of monitoring, we have a new monitoring and compliance tracking system. We are very happy to announce that we will be replacing DC CATS this fall. The system will be called Stepwell. It will track findings of noncompliance issued by OSSE, and it will communicate directly with special programs. Stay tuned for more information regarding the rollout of Stepwell, and please continue to use DC CATS until notified of the transition. We will absolutely be keeping you updated over the next 2 months about this transition. So stay tuned. We wanted to give you a heads up. And if you have any questions about any of the information I presented, feel free to put it in the questions tab. You can also email me directly. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. I'll be passing it over now to our colleagues with DOT, Ms. Chelsea Greer and Dion McAdoo to review transportation reminders and updates.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chelsea Greer. I'm the new community outreach specialist along with my partner, Ms. Dion. And we do have a few reminders and updates for you guys. Next slide, please. So before I start, I want to thank many of you guys for getting those TRFs and calendars in. We greatly appreciate it. I've had the opportunity to correspond with you guys via email and on Teams, so we thank you guys for getting those TRFs in. So I'm kind of going to go over our 6 departments that impact our students' transportation. Of course, we have our routing, which creates route manifests. And then we have our terminal operations. Currently, we have 4 terminals. Those consist of Southwest, 5th Street, New York Avenue, and Adams Place. Also, we have in blue our customer engagement, which is our parent resource center, which parents and or staff and LEAs can call in to get route notifications. And of course, myself and Dion, we serve as the liaison and we do the outreach to the LEAs as well. And then we have our finance, our fleet management to ensure that the buses are operating appropriately to make sure those kiddos get to and from school. And importantly, we have our audit and compliance, track accommodations, of course, making sure that we are adhering to the IEP and or the 504, safety reviews. A lot of times students may have comorbidities, they may have medical and other things of that nature, and they need a nurse to travel on the actual bus, but we have to make sure that we are compliant and making sure that we are following through on those IEPs and 504s. Next slide, please. All righty, so total students with active TRFs are 3,367. Total students with no submitted TRFs, and I will say this has been updated. This is all as of June. If you like those updated numbers, you can definitely email myself and or Dion, but these are numbers as of June. So transportation requests for students returning to the LEA were due on Monday, June the 5th. Once again, many of you all have turned and submitted those TRFs in. Students' first day of school transportation may be impacted if not submitted within 13 business days prior to the first day of school. And that's really important because, number one, we have to research and identify to make sure that actual address submitted is not a commercial address, it's actually a residential address. Make sure that the buses can route to that actual location. And we do what is called a dry run to see how long it will take to actually pick up that student and take them to that destination. So it's important that you guys are meeting those deadlines. If the student will not utilize transportation services, please submit a cancellation request. If you are having difficulties with IDS, we always recommend you submit a OSSE ticket to see what is going on. Just working with a lot of you guys, you may receive errors. At that point, if you're receiving an error, please submit a ticket so we can rectify your situation. Please reconfirm the student addresses with parents prior to the LEA's first day of school. That is very important. A lot of times students may move to a different address, And we definitely do not want to have an old address submitted because, of course, we're going to go based off the information that was submitted, and we could go to the wrong address. So we ask that you verify with the parents, in fact, if they're going to utilize the services, and of course, the address as well. Next slide, please. All righty, so what happens when the TRFs are submitted? Of course, the TRF is submitted in our IDS system. Once it's submitted, its routing and scheduling will create the manifest. At that time, the employees will do what is called a run bid. They will have up to 40 selections that they can submit to see which route that they will incur. Then, of course, they have the dry run practice run. You know, how long would it take for them to leave that terminal to get to that student's house, leaving the student house to actually get to the school as well. Once that is conducted, then of course the route will review. Is there any data, any error corrections? Hey, this is an apartment, they're gated. We need another point of contact. So it's really important to submit those in a timely manner so we can do everything that we can on our end. Next slide, please. All righty. Once again, if you have any questions, concerns, and or comments, please reach out to myself or Dion. We're here. We greatly appreciate you guys being so diligently of turning those TRFs. And if y'all have any questions, please reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. I'll turn it over now to Lauren Thompson, and she'll be reviewing assessments, reminders, and updates. Lauren?
I'm muted. Oh, looks like, okay, I've been unmuted. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So next slide, please. So we're just going to start with some assessment updates. Well, OSSE stands on providing equitable assessment opportunities for all students in the district remains firm as we offer the appropriate alternate statewide assessments for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. Students who are determined eligible by OSSE for alternate assessment participation will take the applicable alternate assessments. And please note that IEP teams make the determinations for students in grades K through 2. So we have MSAA, our alternate assessment for ELA and math. And here are the applicable grade levels. DLM, our alternate science assessment. And alternate access, our alternate English language proficiency assessment. Next slide, please. The following minimum requirements must be met in order for student applications to be considered for alternate assessment participation. So number 1, the student must have a significant cognitive disability. 2, the student is learning content linked to grade level Common Core state standards, next generation science standards, and WIDA English language development standards. And finally, the student requires extensive, direct, individualized instruction and substantial support in the grade appropriate curriculum. And please note that meeting these requirements does not guarantee approval for alternate assessment participation. I would also like to note that DC's significant cognitive disability guidance for IEP teams has been updated and is forthcoming, and the greatest change to the guidance being the inclusion of students who develop a significant cognitive disability at any point prior to age 21. And the prior guidance stated that in order to qualify as a student with a significant cognitive disability, students had to have the condition that significantly affects their cognitive and adaptive functioning from birth. Next slide, please. For OSSE to review a student for alternate assessment eligibility for the 23-24 school year, the following documentation must be made available in the Special Programs database. There needs to be an active IEP on file that indicates alternate assessment selected by the IEP team. There also needs to be a current and fully completed 23-24 DC alternate assessment participation decision documentation form, and that is completed electronically in the Special Programs database. This form is embedded in the Special Programs database as the statewide alternate assessment participation criteria form, and it must be dated within the last 3 calendar years. All sources of supporting evidence for the alternate assessment decision form must be uploaded into the Special Programs database and dated within the last 3 calendar years. So this last bullet is especially important for previously approved students rolling over into the new school year. Although students determined for eligibility for participation in alternate assessments for the 22-23 school year will automatically be determined eligible for the 23-24 school year, OSSE's new requirement is that IEP teams check the dates on the statewide alternate assessment participation criteria form and supporting documentation to make sure that these artifacts are dated within 3 calendar years. Next slide, please. Okay, so this final slide, as it pertains to alternate assessments, is really critical as it outlines the calendar that you will follow to apply for alternate assessment participation. So I'm just going to give you a moment to glance over these important dates. So as you can see, our final deadline for LEA's updating alternate assessment eligibility documentation in the Special Programs database is October 13th, and that is for timely application. And please note that late submissions are applications received between October 14th and November 14th. These applications will be reviewed during the period of November 15th through December 1st, and this is also the appeals determination window. Determinations for these applications will be given on January 5th, 2024. After November 14th, applications need to be submitted for the following school year. Exceptions are new student transfers into your LEA or students with a new disability determination result, and that student would have to meet the criteria for alternate assessment participation. And these, the exceptions, these student files will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And that is our final slide, so I will turn it back over to you, LaShonda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
You're welcome.
All right, I'll turn it over now to Katie Rita and Sharon Powell as they'll be reviewing non-public reminders and updates.
Thanks, LaShonda. Go ahead to the next slide. I'm Katie Rita. I am the Special Education Placement Manager at OSSE. Our first slide is just sort of a reminder slide that we've shared in previous webinars, but with the start of the school year, we thought it would be helpful that you have another list of non-public school support contacts. So you can go through the list and see the various OSSE staff members that will be able to support your questions regarding non-public schools. If you scroll down to the very last bullet point, if you're unclear of who you need to contact at OSSE regarding an issue with a non-public school, a student at a non-public school, something related to non-public schools, please feel free to reach out directly to me, and I'll make sure that it's filtered to the appropriate OSSE staff person. But we wanted to make sure that everyone had another reminder to say, hey, these are who you should be contacting when you have questions. Next slide, please. This is another reminder slide as we start the school year, and we are continuing to get our rolling change in placement and change in location requests. This is just another reminder that at the beginning of last year, in January of 2023, we began to implement the federal requirement of ensuring that an IEP meeting is held prior to changing a student's location. So you can see as we go through that most of the process continues to remain the same, but in between the selecting of the school and issuing the service location is where that IEP meeting bucket holds up. So if you have any questions or you're unsure about the process, please feel free to reach out to me. But it's just a reminder, our LEAs have already been working through this process, and so I think you guys are good to go, but wanted to have another reminder for you. Next slide, please. So this is just a general slide of making sure that we are prepared for success as we start the next school year, and we're looking at the needs of our students in special education. So the first thing is when you're preparing to submit change in placement or change in location cases, please remember that LEAs and parents have to participate in these meetings and respond to OSSE's request for documents. So if the LEA doesn't have staff that are prepared to participate, or parents are not prepared to participate, or you're not sure that you've collected all of the necessary documents that would be necessary to understand the decision that you need to make regarding a change in location or change in placement, you might think, is this the time to submit a request to OSSE? So just know when we get the request, we hit the ground running. You're going to get those emails from us immediately, and we're going to start the process of doing our case review. So be thoughtful in sort of your preparation when you go ahead and submit that request. And then we continue to encourage you to make sure that you have data collection on all domains that are of concern, meaning if there are concerns with the student's social and emotional well-being within the school, making sure that you have data collected that is going to demonstrate what those concerns are. It's always great when we hear about anecdotal information that you're sharing. It's important information to hear, but we want to make sure that in order to make thoughtful decisions for students, and then also be prepared to present students to admissions committees at non-public schools, that we have good data collection on what our students are doing and what their needs are. So some things to think about when you're preparing to submit a request. One other thing that's just come up that I want to make sure is that making sure, especially at the start of the school year, and this is sort of a follow-up throughout the school, that we are maintaining good enrollment information for our students, and that parents are being informed, and that we are ensuring that the LEA to which the student is enrolled at is making the decision. So just as we're in this next transition period of time, please make sure that you're in contact with parents. And if you're unsure about how to move forward for a student, please reach out to me directly so we can make sure that we're problem solving and we're working with that family and student to ensure that we have good transitions and that we're not missing kiddos along the way. Another thing to prepare for this year as you get started is the LEA support of the parent participation during the service location process. I'm sure that those of you who have gone through the change in placement and change in locations process with us recently and working with non-public schools, you know that it is imperative that parents are participating in the admissions processes with non-public schools. That means completing in-person or virtual visits. That means ensuring their student is going on shadow days, and that the parent is timely responding back to non-public schools. So as an LEA team, when you make the decision that a student does require placement at a non-public school, please make sure that you're prepared to support that parent in participation. That means working with the parent to respond to email and phone communication from non-public schools, ensuring to the best of your ability that parents and students are completing visits, supporting parents with transportation concerns if they have to get their student or themselves to non-public schools to complete admissions processes. We can't get students accepted into non-public schools if we do not have full active participation from both the LEA and the parent team, and that you are regularly communicating with the parent and OSSE as issues arise, so we can ensure that we're problem solving together. We will continue to have students that don't have schools and non-public schools that will deny students application because parents and students are not available for admissions processes. And that is not what we want to start the school year off. So please make sure that we are working together as a cohesive team to make sure that we can have our students have all the opportunities that they can when we're going through the school selection process. And then lastly, just making sure that we are setting realistic expectations of the service location process with timeline and location. Obviously, submitting a case today does not ensure that a student will have a non-public school to go on at the start of the school year, right? Let's make sure that we're having realistic expectations. Our non-public schools are starting their school year as well, and they're doing in-service days, and they are getting ready for their students to start the first day of school and prepared for that. And so that means that intakes and visits are not being scheduled until later in the year. And this goes around all major sort of breaks in the school year, right? This is thoughtful timeline and expectations for when you submit requests in December, when schools take a winter break, when they take a mid-year winter break in January, February, around spring break time, around testing time. So as you're, sort of planning and you're collecting data and you're making thoughtful decisions about moving students up and down the continuum, it's important to make sure that you have realistic expectations of timeline and for our non-public schools to make decisions, and also for the availability of staff to participate in appropriate meetings. As always, if there are questions about the placement process, you can visit our page on the website. You can also contact me directly at the email below. We want to make sure that we are supporting our LEAs and serving our students as appropriate in the least restrictive environment. And so we're here to support and problem solve and do what we can to collaborate with you as our partners. I think I will turn it over now to Sharon Powell.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Powell. I'm the manager of the non-public support and oversight team. As Katie and some of the previous presenters just mentioned, LEAs are required by IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, to ensure the provision of a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, also known as FAPE in the LRE, to all students with disabilities. In some cases, and actually in rare cases, the IEP determines that the educational environment that is most appropriate and least restrictive for a particular student is a non-public school or program. By non-public, we're talking about schools that are not a part of the DC public school system and may be located quite a distance from the child's home, school, or, and neighborhood. When a student is removed from the gen ed setting and placed in a non-public school, please note that the student's LEA of enrollment or their enrollment status does not change. Even though the student is no longer physically present in your school building at the beginning of every school day and is no longer receiving instruction or related services from your teachers and providers, the student continues to be enrolled in your LEA, and the LEA of enrollment remains responsible for ensuring that FAPE in the LRE. How does OSSE make sure that LEAs remain active in the education of a student who is placed in a non-public school and are actively monitoring that student's progress? OSSE conducts frequent reviews of student data issues findings of noncompliance when noncompliance is identified, and makes formal determinations every year that reflects each LEA's performance in key IDEA compliance areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide has quite a bit on it. Sorry about that. For the purpose of this presentation, please just generally note that LEAs and non-publics need to work together in order to ensure that students are getting what they need, and that all of the IEP and IEP related processes are moving forward in an efficient and timely manner. Looking at the first bullet points, we see that non-public school is responsible for the direct delivery of instruction and services, while the LEA, who may not be involved in the direct delivery of instruction or services at all, is responsible for monitoring the student's progress and safety. This is done through a number of avenues and activities, including reviewing attendance data in seats. That's the DC Special Education Attendance Tracking System, and that LEAs are reviewing related service documentation and special programs, progress reports also in special programs, and incident reports, either in special programs or in the incident reporting module in QuickBase. Please note or be reminded that non-public schools are required to upload all reports documenting incidents of a qualifying type. So any incident involving the use of a physical restraint or seclusion, physical injury, any cases of suspected child abuse or neglect, or any incident that will qualify as an emergency. So any incident involving an emergency responders such as the fire department, police, or paramedics. Next slide, please. Thank you. Please remember that when you are participating in IEP meetings and considering the appropriateness of a student's placement in a setting that is restrictive, which is what IDEA requires IEP teams to do on at least an annual basis, that IDEA is based upon the basic premise that students with disabilities should be educated together, students with their non-disabled peer, to the maximum extent possible. Removal of children with disabilities from the general education setting should occur only if the nature and severity of the disability is such that education in the regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. Please remember and communicate to your colleagues that the LEA rep, as a member of the IEP team, has a direct and very important say in what a student's educational future will look like. Students who are placed in restrictive settings stay in restrictive settings unless the IEP team makes an active decision to return or transition the student to the general education environment. Please also note that students who are placed in non-public schools are attending schools that are, again, not a part of the DC public school system, and those schools may be located very far away from home. This distance can disrupt the usual systems of family and community support and oversight, and places a great responsibility on the LEA and the SEA to ensure that students are safe and making progress. In terms of creating a strong and productive working relationship with your non-public POCs, we recommend, or with the non-public schools, we recommend that LEAs identify a point of contact or key points of contact at the non-public school and set up regularly occurring meetings. We also recommend that LEAs create a written agreement that spells out who, which party, the LEA or the non-public school, is responsible for what, especially in those areas where that might not be so clear. So for example, in the administration of formal assessments tied to the eligibility determination process. Next slide, please. Okay. So today, the non-public support and oversight team is comprised of 3 team members, myself, Shannon Sterling Hunter, and Crystal Hayes. We are responsible for overseeing and supporting non-public special education schools that are approved by OSSE by conducting on-site monitoring visits, managing the certificate of approval application process, which includes reviewing a non-public school's policies and procedures to ensure, for example, that positive behavioral supports and interventions are being used, and just in general enforcing those laws and regulations that Christy mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Next slide, please. So, and finally, on our last slide here, we'd like to announce that over the summer, OSSE launched a webinar series for non-public schools, and it's through this webinar series that non-public schools will receive support for the transition from SEDS EZIP to special programs, and as well as receive any updates on DC laws and regulations pertaining to special education, any changes to OSSE's monitoring activities or data collection or reporting systems. It will also give non-public schools an opportunity, a forum for sharing best practices together with any other participating non-public special education schools and programs. And it's also our vehicle for sharing key timelines and activities for supporting and coordinating non-public related activities. So the intended audience for this webinar are our non-public school points of contact. Please help us spread the word. Any questions can be directed to me at sharon.powell@dc.gov. I think that is the end. So thank you very much for your time and all that you do for our DC students and families.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you also, Katie, for sharing as well in terms of non-public reminders and updates. We'll pass it over now to Selena Kettleson with our Teaching and Learning Division as she shares some reminders and updates in this regard. Selena?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Selena Kettleson, Director of Academic Excellence and Training, and I'm here to talk to you about reminders and updates from the Division of Teaching and Learning. Next slide, please. We have our dyslexia awareness course. This is a required course for all educators serving kindergarten through grades 12. Participants can earn up to 16 professional learning units, also known as PLUs, for completion of all 3 modules. It's currently available right now on our learning management system. We also have a landing page with lots of resources that support the dyslexia legislation, and you can find those links here, and I believe those links will be shared with you. Again, the module is 3 parts. It takes about 2 to 3 hours to complete. And to gain access to the LMS, educators must ensure, LEA data managers must ensure that all data is submitted through the all staff. That is a system that feeds into our LMS for account creation. So again, if you are just starting this awareness training, you want to check with your data managers to make sure that the all staff data collection is up to date. That is a system that will feed in to create LMS accounts to gain access to this course. Next slide, please. We also are offering a multi-tiered system of support book study. This is a comprehensive system of academic, social, and emotional supports aimed at improving learning outcomes for all students. We're excited to offer this book study experience on the following dates coming up: Tuesday, September 12th, and Wednesday, September 27th. Each participant will be issued a solutions tree book, Taking Action, which is at the core of this book study. So if you're interested in this, you'll see our contact, Angela Iwanaki, who will be available to assist you with registering. Next slide, please. We also are hosting our Foundations of Special Education skill building opportunities for DC educators. We're pleased to share this opportunity, which is available to all educators, especially those in a general education setting who serve students with disabilities and who are also serving in a special education capacity who are looking to increase their skills and knowledge. This is a great course for administrators and service providers, and is a completely asynchronous learning opportunity hosted again on our learning management system. And registration is ongoing for this course. Next slide, please. And last but not least, you'll see here we have our teaching and learning bulletin. We put this out once a month with all of our professional learning opportunities, and we link them for opportunities that come throughout the city that we're hosting here internally. And so please, if you are interested in finding out what's coming soon, you can subscribe to our bulletin to receive notifications and upcoming trainings. And I do believe there's a question, how much time should staff plan to be on the dyslexia awareness training? And that is 2 to 3 hours. Next slide.
All right, thank you so much, Selena, for those updates. All right, now in terms of announcements and reminders, we have the LRP Special Ed Connection trainings available for special education professionals. This is a wonderful resource for understanding laws and policies that dictate service of students with disabilities. For more information, please reach out to Karen Morgan Donaldson at karen.morgan.donaldson, or hyphen, I'm sorry, Donaldson at dc.gov. Just a reminder, as you're thinking about your professional development for the beginning of the school year, OSSE is providing special education law training modules to all LEAs. The purpose of this tool is to provide ongoing technical assistance and training to all LEA and school-based professionals, providing supports and services to students with disabilities in the district. Also, we're really excited to announce, to support LEAs, OSSE has created a scope and sequence of study, which provides a roadmap through the many special education courses made available through this resource, primarily those introductory-based courses. It's a framework that will support you through at least 3 parts of the special education training modules. The access to these modules will also eventually be housed in the Learning Management System, or LMS, which is also very exciting. So stay tuned for more information on that. If you have any questions, please contact me, LaShonda Wilson, at lashonda.wilson@dc.gov with any questions at all. And Christy Weaver has some updates for us also on Progress Center resources.
Thanks, LaShonda. So we went to the IDEA, the OSSE conference this summer, and found some resources that I thought would be helpful to share for y'all today. So the Progress Center publishes a lot of guidance. It's a funded TA center. So they publish a lot of guidance and trainings around IDEA implementation. So they have a bunch of, and these are all free resources. All of these can be found on their website at promotingprogress.org. So these resources include a series of like IEP tip sheets that are aligned with key components of the IEP, tip sheets for parents to help them understand the components of the IEP, instructional practice briefs aligned with evidence-based high leverage practices, also like overviews of guidance. They have a bunch of training modules on their website that I thought were really, really great around basics of special education law. Again, these are all free resources that you can access and share with folks in your school building. So I just wanted to share it here. I highly recommend these resources. Next slide. So while we were at this OSSE conference in July, the U.S. Department of Education released a ton of resources related to discipline and behavioral supports for students. And it's over 200 resources, and it's a really easy resource bank to search through. They also have 6 new resource guides around different areas related to discipline. So again, this is another recommended resource. I just wanted to make you all aware of it. And the OSSE and the U.S. Department of Education are focusing on reducing exclusionary discipline for the next couple of years. So it's stuff that if we're hearing about it from OSSE, you're going to start hearing about it from OSSE soon. So this is something worth accessing and implementing in your school buildings. Thanks, LaShonda.
Thank you so much, Christy. So you have quite a few resources available. So please make sure that you're taking advantage of those. And with that, we'll take a few moments to address any questions that have been dropped in the questions box. There are quite a few. Make sure that you take a few moments here to toggle over to the questions box that is actually that's actually housed on your dashboard. Earlier in the segment, there was a question about the handout. We have added that handout to the presentation, and you'll find that underneath the handouts drop down. Make sure you download a copy and save it. It has live links right in that handout handy for you. There are also quite a few questions that have already been answered in the questions box, so make sure that you also are reviewing those questions and answers, as those also might be questions that you had as well that one of our colleagues in the field has already posed.
I'll go through those questions because I think most of those questions were answered privately. I'm not sure that everybody can actually see those.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Christy.
Sure. So someone asked which POCs at each school have access to the CEPR application. So LEA heads of school and SPED POCs have access to the CEPR application. But if you are working in a school and you need access to it, please reach out to Karen Morgan Donaldson. She can support there. Another question around CEPR: when will LEAs find out whether they were selected for the monitoring cohort? And you'll be notified in the late fall if you were selected for the monitoring cohort. We received a question about whether child outcome summary or CLS data will be entered in StepWell, because right now it's currently in DC CATS. That has actually been integrated into special programs. We'll have more information on that in the next couple of weeks and months, but you will be entering child outcome summary data in student records in special programs, not in the monitoring system anymore. We received a bunch of questions about transportation. There's a surprise. I'm going to go through those in just a second, but I do want to flag for you guys that I added the OSSE's TRS status site. The link to that is in the chat with some updated data around TRF submissions. We received a question about how to access the OST. So the OST is a QuickBase application. You can go to octo.quickbase.com and try and access it that way. We also have a bunch of links to it in various trainings and PowerPoints. Let's see. Oh, we have a question here about technical. I know people are having some challenges with getting access to special programs and implementing things. Someone asked if there's going to be any compliance allowances for that. No, like I said, special programs is a documentation system. Your obligations related to special education under IDEA and Chapter 30 remain the same, and district law. They all remain the same. So you need to be implementing those requirements. This is a documentation system only. We have PDF documents that you can use to document some things if you're unable to access them in special programs, but also please submit OST tickets if you're having trouble. I know that it's taking a little while for the OST process. That's something that OSSE is working on generally, but please continue to submit OST tickets if you're having trouble in the system. There's going to be some growing pains, but in the meantime, your obligations to provide FAPE remain the same. I'm going to kick it to Katie Rita to answer some questions around non-publics.
Thanks, Christy. There were a couple of questions around special programs and non-publics and transportation. So a question about how OSSE can provide additional special program support to non-public schools. Sharon had a slide that talked about a continuing webinar for non-public schools. And so non-public schools have a particular training that is happening monthly to talk about special programs. I believe that the next one is coming up on this Thursday. And so non-public schools can absolutely continue to attend those and ask their questions. Additionally, non-public schools should be submitting OST tickets. And if non-public schools continue to have ongoing questions, they can also reach out to Stephanie Davis in terms of access and questions with securities and assigning related service providers, and all of those things can go directly to our CIO team. Another question about non-public schools getting access to transportation rosters. If you have questions, or non-public schools have questions about who is routed when, what is happening to get kids to have, and rosters being accurate, please reach out to the DOT team, the staff that were on this webinar, and they will be able to support you directly with any questions or concerns about transportation for students attending non-public schools. Another question was about residential programs not having access to special programs, communication, or training. Residential schools have been included in all of our communication to non-public schools regarding access to special programs. If they don't have access, it means they have not completed the necessary steps that were outlined in multiple emails. I believe that there were actually non-public schools that residential schools that attended the training that we did earlier this year before the summer. And so they should make sure that they are reaching out to the direct point of contacts. They can reach out to Sharon to get access to the training if they're not, and then they need to complete all the necessary requirements in order to get access to special programs. It's been outlined in emails for them. Their heads of school should go back, or heads of non-public school should go back and take a look at those emails and make sure that they're getting to appropriate staff members. If a residential school is really unsure of what to do, then they can send an email to Sharon to get connected with the appropriate people in order to maybe go back and look through information that was provided. LEAs are always still responsible for IEPs and special programs for every student attending non-public schools, whether that's a day school, whether that's a residential. We give access to our non-public schools to use our systems for ease of use and things like that. If there is ever an issue or concern with who's entering what, the responsibility for FAPE and for ensuring that things are documented appropriately always falls on the LEA. So if there are issues with access, LEAs should be partnering with their non-public schools, day or residential, to ensure that you're doing what you need to document the efforts that are already happening in place, as Christy shared about the documentation portion of special programs. Then for related service trackers, there are other, you can work with the non-public school, the LEA can, to ensure that they are uploaded if the non-public school is currently having access issues. Christy, were there any other non-public school questions that I didn't catch?
I think you got all of them.
Perfect. If there are outstanding questions, you can always reach out to me and I'll make sure I can get you to the correct people. Thanks.
All right, I will tackle the transportation questions. So one question was, I'm not sure if Katie touched on this. Do LEAs need to put in new TRFs for non-public students who are new to the LEA, but who were routed from the previous LEA? Yes, you should be submitting a new TRF for that student. You can also reach out to Chelsea or Dion, and I can put their email addresses in the chat. If you have any other questions around non-public students, so that they can reach out to the parent and advise them of the new routing information. If you see that a student has a timely, successful TRF submitted, but you're still not seeing that they're routed, you can reach out to Dion or Chelsea. You should submit an OST ticket first. Reach out, and then you reach out to Dion or Chelsea and include the OST ticket number so that they can coordinate with folks internally to make sure that it's responded to, they can check on it. But anytime you are emailing somebody at OSSE about something that you've submitted in an OST ticket, if you include the OST ticket number, it helps us to make sure that we're providing like coordinated and consistent responses to you. So that's just the best practice, generally speaking. Someone who has, if you're having access or access problems with the transportation system, go ahead and email Dion about that and include the OST ticket number if you have it. If you are hearing of parents being told that their transportation hasn't been routed, but you see their TRFs, please go ahead and contact Dion and Chelsea about it, and they can work with the Parent Resource Center to get those issues resolved. Um, Oh, if you have a student with an accurate TRF who's being taken to the wrong school, please reach out immediately to Dion or Chelsea. They will work with you directly to make sure that that is resolved as soon as possible. That obviously should not be happening, but please reach out directly to Dion or Chelsea about that. We received a question about how is OSSE addressing the high number of students who are transitioning between LEAs who had timely tier-outs by the new LEA but are still not being routed. OSSE is processing TRFs as they are submitted, and they're routing students as quickly as possible. We can also offer parent and LEA reimbursement for transportation provided to the school while the TRF is being processed. If you have any questions about that, please, again, reach out to Dion and Chelsea. I know I'm saying that over and over again, but that's going to be your best way to get these issues resolved, okay? And look, we know it's the start of school. Everyone across the country is experiencing issues with transportation. It's going to be a bumpy ride. We're going to get through it together. Okay, but make sure that you are submitting TRFs when you're running into problems and you're contacting folks at DOT when you need support. So again, I will put their contact information in the chat so that everybody has access to it. I think that is all the questions that I saw.
We had a couple of questions for for DAR. They were assessments questions. So if our LEA submitted all assessment application in June, we still won't receive notification from OSSE until November. And we have the feedback on that, and it's correct. Determinations for applications received prior to October 14th will be provided on November 14th. Let's see, I believe there may have been one more question. Okay, so there was a question that was, so no steps for students that qualified last year unless their documentation is dated more than 3 years ago. That's correct. The only steps you should take internally is to review the file to ensure that the alternate assessment has been selected on the IEP and that the DC alternate assessment participation decision documentation form and all supporting evidence are in the special programs database and dated within the last 3 years. I believe we've covered all of the questions that were posed. Just going back through to make one more quick check here. Okay, and if you all have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Those of us who are your designated POCs with each division here at OSSE, we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Also, if you have questions following this this webinar, please feel free to reach out to me, and if I need to route you in the right direction to the proper POC, I'm willing to do that as well. Please make sure you download a copy of the handout. Again, I can't stress it enough. There are links included there, and we want to make sure that you have access to that information and have it handy as you need those various resources. And with that, we want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please be sure to subscribe to our upcoming monthly LEA Special Education Point of Contacts webinar. They will be beginning in September 20th to be exact, is the next launch of our LEA Special Education Point of Contact webinars for the 2023-24 school year. Every month we'll bring you content to keep you most up to date. We'll also be launching a SPED calendar that's going to provide you with lots and lots of details and updates of things that are coming down the pipe in the next couple of months to allow you to plan ahead of time for those items that require action on your end and that have any kind of deadlines attached to them. Again, we want to thank you for joining us. Please stay tuned for more information from us, and be sure to log in next month for our September LEA SPED POC webinar. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.